There are more stars in the observable universe than grains of sand on every beach on Earth. 2 trillion galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars. Many of those stars orbited by worlds that might, just might, be capable of supporting life. And yet, in all the vastness of space, across all the electromagnetic spectrum we can observe, we have heard nothing. Not a whisper, not a signal, not a single confirmed transmission from another technological civilization. This is the Great Silence, and it demands an explanation. Tonight, we're going to explore why, if aliens exist somewhere among those trillion stars, they have never found us, why we have never found them, and what that silence might reveal about the nature of intelligence itself. The answer involves distances that make the mind recoil, time windows measured in geological ages, and barriers so fundamental that even civilizations millions of years older than ours may never overcome them. This is the story of cosmic loneliness, written in mathematics. Let's begin with a question that seems almost absurd in its simplicity. How many worlds might be capable of hosting life? To answer that, astronomers use something called the Drake equation. Not a formula for calculating exact numbers, but a framework for thinking about the problem systematically. It breaks the question down into factors: the rate of star formation, the fraction of stars with planets, the number of planets in habitable zones, and so on through a cascade of probabilities until you arrive at an estimate for the number of detectable civilizations in our galaxy. The Drake equation was developed in 1961 by astronomer Frank Drake, just before the first major conference on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. He needed a way to structure the discussion, to move beyond vague speculation into something more concrete. The equation he devised has 7 terms, each representing a different probability or rate. The first term is the rate of star formation in our galaxy. How many new stars are born each year? Current estimates suggest about 7 new stars per year in the Milky Way. Some years more, some less, but averaged over millions of years, roughly 7. The second term is the fraction of those stars that have planets. This was pure speculation in 1961. We had no way to detect planets around other stars. The technology didn't exist. Drake had to guess. He guessed optimistically, suggesting that perhaps half of all stars might have planetary systems. We now know he was too conservative. Current observations from the Kepler Space Telescope, which operated from 2009 to 2018, suggest that virtually every star has at least one planet. The galaxy is absolutely saturated with worlds. Planets are not rare. They are the norm. The third term is the average number of planets per star system that could potentially support life. Planets in the habitable zone, not too close to their star, where water would boil away, not too far, where everything freezes. The Goldilocks zone, where liquid water can exist on the surface. For our solar system, that's arguably one planet. Earth. Mars is borderline. Venus is too hot. Everything else is too cold or lacks a solid surface. But different types of stars have different habitable zones. Red dwarfs, the most common stars in the galaxy, have habitable zones very close to the star. The planet would be tidally locked, one face always pointing toward the sun, the other in eternal darkness. Would such a world be habitable? We don't know. Conservative estimates suggest maybe 1 to 2 habitable zone planets per star system. Optimistic estimates go higher. The fourth term is the fraction of those habitable planets where life actually emerges. This is where our ignorance becomes profound. We have exactly one data point: Earth. Life arose here. Relatively quickly, in fact. The planet formed 5 billion years ago. The earliest evidence of life dates to about 3.8 billion years ago. That's only 700 million years. In geological terms, almost immediate. Does that mean life emerges easily, given the right conditions? Or did we get extraordinarily lucky? We don't know. Some researchers argue that the building blocks of life, organic molecules, are common in space. We've found amino acids in meteorites. We've detected complex carbon chemistry in interstellar clouds. The raw materials are there. Perhaps the assembly is inevitable. Others point out that even simple self-replicating molecules are staggeringly complex. The chemistry has to be exactly right. The conditions have to persist long enough for natural selection to take hold. It might be extraordinarily rare. We don't know. The fifth term is the fraction of life-bearing planets where intelligence evolves. Again, one data point. On Earth, life existed for billions of years before anything we'd recognize as intelligent appeared. Microbes dominated for 3 billion years. Multicellular organisms for another 600 million. Intelligence, the kind that builds tools and transmits information across generations, emerged very recently. Is intelligence inevitable, given enough time? Or is it a fluke? An accident of evolution that might never happen on most worlds? We don't know. The sixth term is the fraction of intelligent species that develop technology capable of interstellar communication, radio telescopes, transmitters, the ability to send and receive signals across light years. On Earth, that happened in the 20th century. We've been capable of interstellar communication for about 100 years out of the 4.5 billion year history of the planet. 100 years out of 4.5 billion. That's 0.00002% of Earth's history. A blink, a flicker. Nothing. The seventh and final term is the length of time such civilizations release detectable signals into space. How long do technological civilizations last? This is the term that dominates the equation. Because if civilizations last millions of years, broadcasting continuously, the galaxy could be full of signals. But if civilizations typically last only a few centuries before destroying themselves or going silent, then even if intelligence is common, the number of detectable civilizations at any given moment might be very small. We are, right now, in our first century as a technological civilization. We have no idea how long we'll last. We've built weapons that could annihilate our species in hours. We've altered our planet's climate in ways that might make it uninhabitable. We've created artificial intelligence systems whose long-term consequences we don't understand. Will we survive another century? Another 1,000 years? Another million? We don't know. The Drake equation doesn't give us truth. It gives us a way to organize our ignorance. But even conservative estimates, even pessimistic ones, produce unsettling results. Start with this. There are roughly 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Our galaxy alone, not the universe, just our local collection of suns. 400 billion. If even 1% of those stars host planets in the habitable zone, the Goldilocks distance where liquid water can exist, that's 4 billion potentially life-bearing worlds. And current observations suggest the real number is much higher. Perhaps 20 to 40% of Sun-like stars have Earth-sized planets in their habitable zones. Let that settle for a moment. 20% of 400 billion is 80 billion worlds in one galaxy. Now narrow it further. Suppose only 1 in 1,000 of those worlds actually develops life. That still leaves 80 million living planets. Narrow it again. Suppose only 1 in 1,000 living worlds develops intelligent life capable of technology, radio, transmission, spaceflight. That's still 80,000 technological civilizations in our galaxy alone. And there are 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. The mathematics of probability suggests that we should not be alone, that intelligence should be common, that the galaxy should be buzzing with signals, thick with transmissions, crowded with evidence of minds reaching out across the darkness. And yet, silence. In 1950, physicist Enrico Fermi sat in a cafeteria at Los Alamos National Laboratory, discussing flying saucers and the probability of interstellar travel with colleagues. The conversation moved through the usual territory: distances, timescales, energy requirements. Until Fermi interrupted with a question so simple, it stopped the discussion cold. Where is everybody? 3 words. The Fermi Paradox in its purest form. If intelligent life is common, if the galaxy is billions of years old, if even a tiny fraction of civilizations developed interstellar, travel or sent out self-replicating probes, we should see evidence everywhere. The galaxy should have been colonized millions of years ago. Every star system explored, every planet catalogued. But we see nothing. We have been listening with radio telescopes since 1960. We have examined thousands of nearby stars for signs of artificial signals. We have looked for megastructures, heat signatures from advanced engineering, laser pulses, optical beacons, atmospheric chemical signatures that shouldn't exist naturally. Nothing. The most sophisticated search in human history, spanning 6 decades and leveraging instruments of extraordinary sensitivity, has produced exactly 0 confirmed detections of extraterrestrial intelligence. This is what scientists call the Great Silence, and it is one of the most profound mysteries in all of science. So what does this mean? There are really only 2 possibilities, and both are staggering in their implications. Either we are alone, genuinely, cosmically alone, the only technological civilization in a galaxy containing 400 billion star systems, or we are not alone, but something prevents contact, something so fundamental, so universal, that it applies to every civilization that has ever arisen in the history of the Milky Way. The second possibility is what we're here to explore. Because if intelligence exists elsewhere, if other minds have gazed up at their own night skies and wondered the same questions we do, then the silence tells us something crucial about the nature of the universe itself. It tells us that there are barriers, walls built not by choice, but by physics, by mathematics, by the fundamental architecture of space-time. Tonight, we're going to examine 4 of these barriers. 4 reasons why, even if the galaxy teems with life, even if intelligence has arisen thousands of times in our cosmic neighborhood, they have never found us. And we have never found them. Let's begin with the most obvious barrier, and perhaps the most absolute: distance. The Milky Way galaxy is approximately 100,000 light-years in diameter. 100,000. That number is easy to say, easy to write. But it represents a scale that human minds are not equipped to grasp intuitively. A light-year is the distance light travels in 1 year. Light moves at roughly 300,000 kilometers per second. In 1 year, moving at that speed without pause, light crosses about 9.5 trillion kilometers. That's the unit we're using. and the galaxy is 100,000 of them wide. Let's try to translate that into something more comprehensible. Imagine you could travel at the speed of a commercial airliner, 900 kilometers per hour, a speed that feels fast when you're sitting in a window seat, watching the ground blur beneath you. At that speed, how long would it take to cross the galaxy? 120 million years. Longer than the dinosaurs walked the Earth. Longer than flowering plants have existed. Longer than the Atlantic Ocean has been open. And that's just to cross our own galaxy, not to reach another galaxy, not to explore every star system, just to travel in a straight line from one edge to the other. Now suppose we improve our technology dramatically. Suppose we build a spacecraft capable of traveling at 1% the speed of light. That's 3,000 kilometers per second, faster than anything humans have ever built by an order of magnitude. Faster than the Voyager probes, which are currently the most distant human-made objects, traveling at about 17 kilometers per second. Faster than any realistic near-term technology. At 1% of light speed, crossing the galaxy would take 10 million years. Still an inconceivable span of time. Longer than our species has existed. Longer than any human institution or nation or language has endured. 10 million years. That's how long it would take to cross the galaxy at a speed we cannot currently achieve and may never achieve. So what about the nearest star? Surely if there's a civilization on a planet orbiting Alpha Centauri, our closest stellar neighbor, the distance wouldn't be quite so crushing. Alpha Centauri is 4.37 light-years away. At 1% of light speed, the journey would take 437 years. Longer than the United States has existed as a nation. Longer than the scientific revolution. Long enough that everyone who began the journey would be dead generations before arrival, along with their children and their children's children. And that's assuming perfect navigation, no malfunctions, no course corrections, and sufficient resources to sustain a closed ecosystem for centuries. But wait, let's be even more generous. Let's imagine a propulsion system that somehow reaches 10% of light speed, an extraordinary achievement requiring energy sources and engineering we can barely conceive. Even such, then the journey to Alpha Centauri takes 43 years, an entire human lifetime. One way. Do you see the problem beginning to take shape? Interstellar travel isn't just difficult. It isn't just expensive. It requires timescales that exceed the lifespan of individual organisms, exceed the stability of governments, exceed the continuity of cultures. And we're talking about the nearest star. Not a star halfway across the galaxy. Not an interesting star with promising planets. The very closest one, 4.37 light-years. The absolute minimum distance to another star system. And it would take a human lifetime to reach it, assuming technology we don't have. Now imagine trying to search the galaxy systematically, to send probes or ships to every star system that might harbor life, to explore, to listen, to make contact. The numbers become absurd. If a civilization sent out probes at 1% of light speed, and those probes could somehow replicate themselves using materials from each star system they visited, spreading exponentially across the galaxy, the complete colonization of the Milky Way would still take millions of years. And that's assuming perfect replication, no failures, no obstacles, and a level of technology that borders on magic. Self-replicating machines that can land on asteroids, extract raw materials, manufacture copies of themselves, and launch those copies to the next star system. All autonomously. All reliably. all for millions of years without failure. This is what astronomers mean when they talk about the tyranny of distance. Space is not merely large. It is large in a way that makes intuitive understanding impossible. The distances between stars are so vast that even light, the fastest thing in the universe, takes years to cross them. And anything with mass, anything physical, must travel slower than light. Much slower. The fastest spacecraft humans have ever built is the Parker Solar Probe, which at its maximum velocity reaches about 190 kilometers per second. That sounds fast. It is fast. But it's still only 0.06% of the speed of light. At that speed, reaching Alpha Centauri would take about 7,000 years. 7,000 years. Longer than recorded human history. Longer than cities have existed. Longer than agriculture. That's using our fastest current technology to reach the nearest star. The speed of light is not just a speed limit. It's a prison wall. An absolute barrier imposed by the structure of spacetime itself. As an object with mass approaches the speed of light, its energy requirements increase exponentially. To actually reach light speed would require infinite energy. It cannot be done. This is not an engineering problem. It's not a matter of better rockets, or more fuel, or smarter trajectories. It's a fundamental law of physics. Mass cannot reach light speed, and even if we could approach it, even if we could build a ship that traveled at 99% of light speed, the journey to the far side of the galaxy would still take 100,000 years as measured by an outside observer. Time dilation would make the trip shorter for the travelers themselves, but to the civilization that sent them, to the world they left behind, over 100,000 years would pass. Everyone they knew would be dead. Their entire civilization might have risen and fallen. Languages would have evolved beyond recognition. Technologies would be completely different. They would return to a world that was more alien to them than any planet they visited. So every civilization that has ever existed, every intelligence that has ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of reaching them, faces the same brutal constraint. They are trapped, not by lack of ambition, not by technological failure, but by physics. The universe is structured in such a way that reaching other stars is monumentally, perhaps prohibitively, difficult. And reaching other galaxies is, for all practical purposes, impossible. The nearest major galaxy to the Milky Way is Andromeda, 2.5 million light-years away. Even if you could travel at the speed of light, which you cannot, the journey would take 2.5 million years. By the time you arrived, your species might have evolved into something unrecognizable. Your home planet might be a frozen rock orbiting a dead star. Everything you knew, everyone you loved, every culture and language and idea that defined your civilization would be gone. And that's the nearest major galaxy. Most galaxies are billions of light-years away. The observable universe is 93 billion light-years in diameter. The distances are so vast that galaxies on opposite sides of the observable universe can never communicate. The expansion of space itself is carrying them apart faster than light can travel between them. They are causally disconnected, forever. Light leaving one of those galaxies today will never reach the other. Not in a trillion years. Not in a Google years. Never. The universe is not just large. It's structured in such a way that most of it is permanently inaccessible, hidden behind horizons we can never cross. This is the first barrier, the tyranny of distance. the brutal mathematics of spacetime that makes interstellar travel staggeringly difficult and intergalactic travel effectively impossible. But even if a civilization somehow overcomes this barrier, even if they develop propulsion systems that can cross light years in reasonable time frames, there remains a second problem: time. And yet, this is only the first barrier. Let's consider a thought experiment. Suppose there is a technological civilization on a planet orbiting a star 200 light-years from Earth. Not far, by galactic standards. Close, even. A nearby neighbor in cosmic terms. Suppose they developed radio technology in the year 1800. At the same time, humans were just beginning to experiment with electricity. This alien civilization was broadcasting signals into space. Those signals spread outward at the speed of light, weakening as they go, but theoretically detectable. By the year 2000, those signals would have traveled 200 light-years. They would reach Earth. Except we weren't listening in 2000. We started listening in 1960. For the first 160 years of their transmissions, their signals passed through our solar system unnoticed, unrecorded, lost forever in the cosmic background. Now suppose we started transmitting back. A response, a greeting. Evidence that we received their signal and understood it. That response would take 200 years to reach them. They would receive our reply in the year 2200, 400 years after they first spoke into the void. How many civilizations survive for 400 years in a technological state? How many remain interested in signals they sent out centuries ago? How many still exist at all? This is the second barrier: time. Not just the time it takes to travel between stars, but the time it takes for signals to cross the void. The windows during which communication becomes possible. Because civilizations do not last forever. We know this because we can see it in our own history. Empires rise and fall. Technologies emerge and become obsolete. Languages evolve into mutual incomprehensibility within centuries. The pace of change accelerates with technological advancement, and there's no reason to believe that trend reverses. A technological civilization is a temporary state, a phase, a brief window between pre-technological existence and something else. What that something else is, we don't know. Post-technological simplicity, self-destruction. Transcendence into forms we can't recognize? We don't know, but we do know that nothing lasts forever. For billions of years, Earth was home to nothing but microbes. Single-celled, organisms dominating every ecosystem, exchanging genetic material, evolving slowly. Then, around 600 million years ago, complex multicellular life emerged. Animals, plants, ecosystems of bewildering diversity. For nearly all of that time, there was no intelligence, no technology, no radio signals, no observatories, no spacecraft, nothing that would be visible to an alien astronomer searching for signs of technological life. Anatomically modern humans appeared around 300,000 years ago. For most of that time, we were hunter-gatherers, living in small groups, leaving no trace that would be visible from space. No lights, no radio emissions, no chemical signatures in the atmosphere that would distinguish our planet from any other world with biology. Agriculture emerged 10,000 years ago. Cities, 5,000 years ago. The scientific method, 400 years ago. Radio, 125 years ago. Spaceflight, 67 years ago. The Internet, 50 years ago. Artificial intelligence, depending on how you count, perhaps 10 years ago in its current transformative form. In the 4.5 billion year history of Earth, we have been a technological civilization for less than 1/10,000,000th of that time. A flash, a flicker, a brief candle in a very long night. How long will it last? We don't know. We have no data. A sample size of 1. No other technological civilizations to study. No historical precedents. No way to predict whether we're typical or unusual. But we can observe that the challenges facing technological civilizations are not trivial. Climate change threatens to make large portions of our planet uninhabitable within centuries. Nuclear weapons could destroy our civilization in hours. Engineered pathogens could wipe out our species. Artificial intelligence might develop goals misaligned with human survival. Resource depletion, ecological collapse, social instability, any number of risks could end us. The same intelligence that builds radio telescopes also builds weapons of extraordinary destructive power. The same technology that lets us communicate across the globe also enables surveillance, manipulation, and control. The same science that cures diseases can engineer pandemics. The same industrial capacity that raises living standards also destabilizes the climate. Perhaps we'll navigate these challenges. Perhaps we'll survive them all. Perhaps we'll endure for millions of years, spreading through the solar system, solving every crisis, maintaining continuity across geological time. Or perhaps not. Perhaps the average lifespan of a technological civilization is measured in centuries. Perhaps 1,000 years. Perhaps 10,000. Even 10,000 years is nothing on cosmic timescales. Let's return to our thought experiment. Our alien civilization 200 light-years away. Suppose they existed as a technological society for 5,000 years. A remarkable achievement. Millennia of continuous technological culture, far exceeding anything humans have managed. But the galaxy is 13.6 billion years old. If we represent the history of the galaxy as a single calendar year, with the Big Bang occurring at midnight on January 1st, and the present day at midnight on December 31st, then 5,000 years of technological civilization would last about 1 second. 1 second, out of an entire year. Now imagine another civilization existing somewhere else in the galaxy. They also last 5,000 years, another 1 second flash on the cosmic calendar. What are the odds that these two 1 second flashes occur simultaneously? That they overlap? Vanishingly small. Even if the galaxy contains thousands of technological civilizations, if each one exists for only a brief window of time, the probability that any two are active at the same moment becomes extraordinarily low. This is what astronomers mean when they talk about synchronicity. Problems. It's not enough for intelligent life to evolve. It's not enough for that life to develop technology. All of that has to happen at the right time. Within a window narrow enough that signals can be exchanged. That contact becomes possible. And the window is so narrow. Consider, the closest star where we've detected a potentially habitable planet is Proxima Centauri, 4.2 light-years away. If a civilization there began broadcasting today, we would receive their signal in 4.2 years. If we responded immediately, they would receive our response in another 4.2 years. 8.4 years for a single exchange. The simplest possible conversation. Hello. 8 years. Hello back. For that conversation to happen. Both civilizations must exist simultaneously, must be technologically capable of transmission and reception, must be actively searching, and must maintain interest long enough to complete the exchange. Every additional light year of distance adds 2 years to the conversation time. A civilization 100 light-years away requires 200 years per exchange. Every question and answer separated by the span of entire lifetimes. Can you maintain a conversation with someone when each response takes longer than you will live? Can a civilization? Human history suggests the answer is no. We struggle to maintain continuity across decades, let alone centuries. Our longest-lived institutions, religions, and universities have existed for a millennium or two at most, and even they transform beyond recognition over such timescales. The Catholic Church of today would be nearly unrecognizable to someone from the year 1000. The language is different, the theology has evolved, the practices have changed. The social context is completely transformed. Oxford University was founded in the late 11th century. It still exists. But the subjects taught, the methods of instruction, the role in society, all of this has changed fundamentally. The continuity is more symbolic than substantive. The Great Pyramids were already ancient ruins by the time of Cleopatra. The Roman Empire rose and fell. Languages have emerged, flourished, and died. Technologies have been invented and forgotten. Greek fire, Damascus steel, Roman concrete. Techniques lost because the knowledge wasn't preserved across generations. And we expect to maintain a conversation with a civilization 50 light-years away, 100? 1,000? The temporal barriers are not merely practical, they are existential. Think about what it would mean to receive a signal from a civilization 1,000 light-years away. That signal was transmitted 1,000 years ago, in the year 1025. Before universities, before the scientific method, before the Renaissance, before the Industrial Revolution, before everything that defines modern civilization. The beings who sent that signal are long dead. Their civilization has evolved or collapsed or transcended into something we wouldn't recognize. We would be receiving a message from ghosts. And if we replied, our response wouldn't arrive for another 1,000 years. The year 3025. As far in our future as we are from the Middle Ages. Would humanity even exist in recognizable form by then? Would we still care about a response we sent 1,000 years ago? Would we even remember sending it? This is the cruel mathematics of interstellar communication. The distances are so vast that the time delays become longer than civilizations endure. But there's another temporal problem. Even more fundamental. Civilizations might not overlap at all. The galaxy is 13.6 billion years old. Star formation began short after the galaxy formed. The first stars ignited, lived, and died billions of years before our sun existed. Our sun is relatively young, only 4.6 billion years old. There are stars in the galaxy that are nearly 3 times as old. If planets formed around those ancient stars, if life emerged, if intelligence developed, those civilizations could have risen and fallen billions of years before Earth even existed. They could have built wonders, explored the galaxy, transmitted signals for millions of years, then gone extinct or evolved beyond our ability to recognize, or simply stopped broadcasting, all before the first molecules of our solar system condensed from the interstellar medium. We would never know they existed. Their signals would have washed across empty space where Earth would someday form. they would have passed through a void, unheard, unrecorded, lost, and the reverse is equally possible. Right now, as we transmit our first tentative signals into space, there might be planets orbiting distant stars where intelligence will arise 1 billion years from now. They will search for us. They will find nothing, because we'll be gone by then. Earth's sun will exhaust its hydrogen fuel in about 5 billion years. It will expand into a red giant, engulfing Mercury, Venus, and possibly Earth. Even before that, the increasing luminosity of the aging sun will make Earth uninhabitable. The oceans will boil away. The atmosphere will be stripped by solar wind. The planet will become a scorched, sterile rock. All of this will happen billions of years from now. But it will happen. And if we haven't spread to other star systems by then, if we're still confined to this one planet orbiting this one star, we'll die with it. Future civilizations, arising on planets not yet formed, will search the galaxy and find dead worlds. They'll catalog the ruins of civilizations that existed long before them. They'll wonder, just as we do, where everyone is, and they'll hear the same silence because the window is too narrow, the galaxy is too old. Civilizations flicker into existence and then fade, like candles lit in sequence, never burning at the same time, each one illuminating a tiny region of space for a brief moment, then going dark. The galaxy might have hosted thousands of civilizations, millions. But if they don't overlap temporally, if they exist in different epochs separated by millions or billions of years, they might as well be alone. This is the second barrier: time, the narrow windows, the lack of synchronicity, the brutal fact that civilizations are temporary and the universe is ancient. But even if we solve the distance problem, even if two civilizations somehow exist at the same moment in cosmic history and find a way to exchange signals across the light years, there remains a third barrier, perhaps the most troubling of all. Would we even recognize each other? In the late 1970s, researchers began teaching sign language to great apes, gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans. The results were remarkable. These animals learned hundreds of signs. They could request food, express emotions, even combine words in novel ways that suggested genuine, linguistic creativity. A gorilla named Coco learned over 1,000 signs. She could describe her feelings. She mourned the death of her kitten. She engaged in what appeared to be imaginative play. She created new word combinations like finger bracelet for ring. And yet, despite sharing 99% of our DNA, despite millions of years of common evolutionary history, despite living on the same planet and breathing the same air, we cannot have a meaningful conversation with a gorilla. We share biology. We share an environment. We share ancestors that lived just a few million years ago, and we cannot communicate. Not really. Not in any deep sense. We can exchange simple requests. We can convey basic emotional states. But we cannot discuss abstract concepts. We cannot explain mathematics. We cannot share our understanding of the universe. The gap is too wide. Our minds are too different. Now imagine trying to communicate with something that shares none of that history, intelligence that evolved under a different star, on a world with different chemistry, different gravity, different evolutionary pressures. An intelligence shaped by billions of years of divergent history. What would we even say to each other? When SETI researchers designed the first interstellar messages, they made certain assumptions. They assumed that mathematics would be universal, that any technological civilization would understand prime numbers, binary, the basic constants of physics. These seem like safe assumptions. Mathematics is not invented, it is discovered. The ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter is the same on every planet in the universe. The speed of light is constant. The charge of an electron is invariant. Surely these provide common ground. But do they? Consider the famous Arecibo message, transmitted in 1974 toward the globular cluster Messier 13, 25,000 light-years away. It contained information about humanity, encoded in binary, the numbers 1 through 10, the atomic numbers of elements that make up DNA, a crude diagram of the double helix, a formula for the sugars and bases in DNA, the shape of a human figure, the population of Earth, a representation of our solar system, and a depiction of the Arecibo telescope itself. The entire message was 1,679 bits long. It would take just under 3 minutes to transmit. All of this assumes the recipient can recognize the message as intentional, that they can decode binary, that they understand base 10, counting, that they know what DNA is, or even use DNA, that they can interpret two-dimensional visual representations, that they care about any of this information. Every single one of those assumptions could be wrong. Binary coding assumes a preference for base 2 mathematics. But there's no fundamental reason to use base 2, except that it's convenient for digital computers. An alien civilization might use base 3, or base 12, or continuous analog systems. They might not think in terms of discrete states at all. The numbers 1 through 10 assume base 10 counting, which humans use because we have 10 fingers. An alien species with 8 appendages might naturally use base 8. A species with no manipulative appendages at all might use a completely different numerical system. The diagram of DNA assumes the recipient knows what a helix looks like, that they can interpret two-dimensional projections of three-dimensional structures, that they recognize this particular pattern as significant. But what if their biochemistry is completely different? What if they don't use nucleic acids for genetic information? What if they're not even carbon-based? Silicon biochemistry, ammonia solvents, exotic chemistries we can't imagine. They would look at our diagram of DNA and see nothing meaningful. The representation of a human figure assumes visual perception, that they can interpret stick figures, that they care what we look like. An alien intelligence might not process information visually. It might not have eyes at all. It might perceive the world through echolocation like bats, or electrical fields like sharks, or chemical gradients, or quantum states. To such a being, a visual diagram would be meaningless, gibberish, like trying to explain color to someone who has never seen. And even if they do perceive visually, they might not interpret two-dimensional representations the way we do. Human children must learn to interpret drawings. It's not innate. We're taught that lines on paper can represent edges, that shading indicates depth, that certain conventions mean certain things. An alien intelligence would have none of that cultural context. They would see patterns, regularities, structure. But would they recognize it as communication, as information about another species, as an attempt at contact, or would they interpret it as a natural phenomenon? A quirk of astrophysics, background noise? Think about the ways humans have failed to recognize intelligence on our own planet. For centuries, we believed that tool use defined humanity, that only humans could create and use tools for specific purposes. Then we observed chimpanzees using sticks to extract termites from mounds. They would select the right stick, modify it by stripping leaves, insert it into the termite mound, wait for termites to climb on, then extract it and eat the termites. This is tool use. This is planned, purposeful behavior. We moved the goalposts. Tool use doesn't define humanity. Tool-making does. Then we observed crows crafting hooks from wire to retrieve food from containers. They would bend the wire into a hook shape, use it to pull a basket of food up from a tube, all without prior training. They solved the problem through insight. We moved the goalposts again. Language defines us. Abstract symbolic communication. Then we learned that whales have complex songs that vary by region and change over time. Cultural transmission of information. Prairie dogs have alarm calls with grammatical structure. They can communicate, "There is a tall, thin human wearing a blue shirt," versus "There is a short, wide human wearing a red shirt," using different combinations of sounds. Bees communicate spatial information through dance. The waggle dance encodes the direction and distance to food sources. Other bees can decode this information and fly directly to the indicated location. This is symbolic communication. Abstract representation of spatial relationships. We moved the goalposts again. Culture defines us. The transmission of learned behaviors across generations. But orcas have distinct cultural groups with different hunting techniques passed down through generations. Orcapods in different regions have completely different feeding strategies. Some hunt seals by creating waves that knock them off ice floes. Others hunt rays by pinning them to the seafloor. These techniques are taught from mother to calf. They persist for generations. They define distinct cultural groups. Chimpanzee tribes have unique tool-making traditions. Some populations use stones to crack nuts. Others don't, even though they have access to the same resources. The behavior is cultural, not genetic. Learned, not innate. Again and again, we discover intelligence in forms we didn't expect. And again, we initially fail to recognize it because it doesn't match our preconceptions. We define intelligence in terms of what we do: language, tools, culture, abstract thought. But these definitions are anthropocentric. They're based on human cognition, human evolution, human capabilities. An alien intelligence might be intelligent in completely different ways. Now scale that problem to the cosmos. An intelligence that evolved in the atmosphere of a gas giant. A being made of complex organic chemistry floating in the upper atmosphere of Jupiter or Saturn. Existing as patterns of chemical reactions in storm systems. Communicating through modulations of electromagnetic emissions we would interpret as lightning. Would we recognize that as intelligence? We would observe the planet. We would see storms, lightning, atmospheric chemistry. We would catalog it all as natural phenomena. We would build models of atmospheric dynamics. We might even note peculiar regularities in the lightning patterns. But would we conclude that it was communication, that it was intelligent, or would we assume it was just complex weather? An intelligence that exists in the crust of a tidally locked planet, where one side always faces its star and the other is eternally dark, where the only habitable zone is a thin ring of twilight, and where time is measured in geological processes rather than orbital periods. Such beings might think on timescales of thousands of years. One thought taking a century to complete. Their civilization enduring for billions of years, but operating so slowly that we would never notice any change. We would observe the planet, see no movement, no activity, no technology on scales we recognize, and conclude it was lifeless. We would be wrong. An intelligence that has existed for millions of years, that solved all the problems of survival so long ago that it no longer broadcasts, no longer explores, no longer reaches outward, content to exist in a state we would interpret as dormancy. Would we see that as life at all? We look for civilizations like ours, young, expanding, broadcasting, reaching outward with the enthusiasm of adolescence. But what if most civilizations pass through that phase quickly? What if the universe is full of ancient intelligences that have moved beyond the need to shout into the void? What if maturity, for a civilization, means quietness? The problem is deeper than mere translation. It's conceptual. It's about what intelligence looks like, what it wants, how it manifests in the universe. We search for signals that look like our signals. Radio transmissions with structure, regularity, narrow-band emissions that wouldn't occur naturally. We look for wavelengths we use, modulation schemes we recognize, purposes we understand. We're looking for ourselves, reflected in alien mirrors. But what if intelligence doesn't need radio? What if an advanced civilization communicates through quantum entanglement, and their messages are encoded in states we can't measure without destroying the information? What if they use gravitational waves, ripples in space-time itself, that we've only just learned to detect? What if they've moved to neutrino communication, particle streams that pass through planets like light through glass, and we're standing in the middle of their internet without realizing it? What if they did use radio, but billions of years ago, and have long since moved on to technologies we haven't even theorized yet? What if they're here, right now, all around us, embedded in cosmic rays or dark matter or dimensions we can't perceive, and we pass through their civilization every day without noticing? Like ants walking across a fiber optic cable, unaware of the terabytes of information flowing through it at the speed of light just beneath their feet. The ants have no concept of fiber optics, no ability to detect the signals, no framework for understanding that they're crossing a highway of information. To them, it's just a piece of the landscape, inert, meaningless. Are we the ants? There's a concept in cognitive science called Umwelt, a German word meaning the sensory world available to a particular organism. It refers to the perceptual bubble that every species lives in, determined by its sensory organs and cognitive architecture. A bat's Umwelt is dominated by echolocation. The world is a landscape of echoes, of returning sound waves painting three-dimensional space in exquisite detail. Bats can perceive texture, motion, even heartbeats through echolocation. Their world is richer in some ways than ours, poorer in others. A bee sees ultraviolet light. Flowers that appear plain white to us are covered in ultraviolet patterns visible to bees, guiding them to nectar. The bee's world has colors we can't see, patterns we can't perceive. A shark senses electrical fields. The muscles of prey generate tiny electrical currents as they contract. Sharks can detect these fields and locate prey buried in sand, completely invisible to any visual or chemical sense. The shark's world is full of electrical ghosts. Every species lives in its own Umwelt, its own sensory bubble, perceiving only the slice of reality its biology permits. Humans see wavelengths between about 400 and 700 nanometers. We call this visible light, as if it were the totality of light, when in fact it's a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum, a sliver between infrared and ultraviolet. We can't see infrared. We can't see ultraviolet without instruments, we can't directly perceive magnetic fields, or radio waves, or X-rays, or gamma rays. Our Umwelt is astonishingly narrow. The electromagnetic spectrum spans many orders of magnitude, from radio waves meters long to gamma rays smaller than atomic nuclei, and we see only the middle octave, the narrowest slice. Everything else is invisible to us without instruments, and yet we search for alien intelligence by looking for signals in our Umwelt. Signals we can detect with our instruments, encoded in ways we can decode, conveying information we consider important. What are the odds that an alien intelligence shares our Umwelt? Not just our sensory range, but our conceptual framework. Our assumptions about what matters, what's worth communicating, what intelligence looks like. The odds might be zero. There's a famous thought experiment about this. Imagine humans trying to explain the concept of color to a species that evolved in total darkness. Not just the wavelengths, but the experience of seeing. The subjective quality of redness, of blueness. The way sunset orange feels different from morning gold. Could we do it? Could we convey what it's like to see a sunset to something that has never seen? We could describe wavelengths. We could explain that different wavelengths of light stimulate different receptors in the eye, generating different neural patterns. We could provide all the physics and neuroscience. But would that convey the experience, the qualia, what it feels like to see red? Probably not. Now reverse the situation. An alien intelligence tries to convey some fundamental aspect of their existence to us, something as basic to them as color is to us. But we have no receptors for it, no neural architecture to process it, no words to describe it. They could be broadcasting that information constantly. They could be desperate to make contact, and we would never know because we lack the ability to perceive what they're saying. This is the third barrier, not distance, not time, but comprehension. The terrifying possibility that we could be surrounded by intelligence and never recognize it. That the great silence is not silence at all, but our own deafness. That the galaxy is full of signals we're not equipped to hear, full of intelligence we're not capable of recognizing, full of civilizations that have tried to contact us, are trying right now, and we're oblivious. We're the gorilla being shown mathematical equations. We see the symbols. We might even find them aesthetically pleasing. But we don't understand what they mean. We don't grasp that someone is trying to communicate something profound. And from the perspective of the aliens, we're unresponsive, silent, possibly not even intelligent. They might conclude we're just clever animals, capable of building things, but not capable of true understanding, not worth talking to. Or worse, they might not recognize us as alive at all. Hold that thought. Because there's a fourth barrier we need to consider, one that doesn't assume failure of communication or gaps in perception, but asks a more fundamental question. What if intelligence itself is the rarest thing in the universe? Go back 4 billion years. Earth is a violent place. The surface is molten rock. The atmosphere is toxic. The planet is being bombarded by asteroids and comets. No life yet. No chemistry complex enough to be called living. But over millions of years, something changes. Organic molecules form in the oceans, simple carbon chains, amino acids, nucleotides. They begin to assemble into more complex structures. Some of these structures can copy themselves. Crude, error-prone replication. But it's enough. Natural selection takes hold. The first cells emerge. This step, from chemistry to biology, from non-life to life, is what astrobiologists call abiogenesis. We don't know how it happened on Earth. We have theories, hypotheses, laboratory experiments that can produce amino acids and nucleotides under early Earth conditions. Scientists have created self-replicating RNA molecules in test tubes. They've demonstrated that lipid membranes can form spontaneously. They've shown that many of the building blocks of life arise naturally in the right chemical environment. But we've never witnessed the actual transition. We've never created life from non-living materials. We've assembled the pieces. We've demonstrated that the chemistry is plausible. But the full step from chemistry to self-replicating, evolving life remains unachieved. It might be easy. Perhaps given the right condition, life emerges inevitably, quickly, reliably. Chemistry flowing naturally toward biology. The laws of thermodynamics favoring complexity and self-organization. Or it might be staggeringly, incomprehensibly rare. A chance event so unlikely that it has happened only once in the observable universe. A cosmic accident. We don't know. But let's assume it's relatively common. Let's assume life emerges on many worlds. Billions of planets, across the galaxy, hosting microbial organisms, single-celled creatures, simple chemistry-based replicators. What happens next? On Earth, life remained microbial for about 3 billion years. 3 billion. Fully 2/3 of Earth's history. Single-celled organisms dominated every ecosystem. They were extraordinarily successful, filling every available niche, evolving extraordinary diversity at the cellular level. They invented photosynthesis, converting sunlight into chemical energy and releasing oxygen as waste. They created the ozone layer, making the surface habitable for more complex life. They developed nitrogen fixation, sulfur metabolism, methane production. They transformed the planet, but they remained simple. No tissues, no organs, no complex structures, just cells. Floating in oceans, coating rocks, forming microbial mats for 3 billion years. Then, around 2 billion years ago, something extraordinary happened. One type of cell engulfed another. Instead of digesting, the two formed a symbiotic relationship. The engulfed cell became a mitochondrion, an organelle that produces energy efficiently through aerobic respiration. The host cell provided protection and resources. This event, called endosymbiosis, created the first eukaryotic cell. The ancestor of every complex organism on Earth. Every plant, every animal, every fungus. It happened once, in 3 billion years of microbial evolution. With countless trillions upon trillions of organisms, this crucial transition occurred exactly one time. That suggests it might be rare, not inevitable, not easy. A chance event that might not happen on most worlds, even worlds teeming with microbial life. Think about what had to go right. One cell had to engulf another without destroying it. The engulfed cell had to provide some benefit to the host. The host had to provide some benefit to the engulfed cell. The two had to integrate their metabolisms. They had to synchronize their reproduction. Eventually, the engulfed cell had to transfer most of its genes to the host nucleus, becoming permanently dependent. This is a complex, multi-step process. Every step had to work. Every intermediate stage had to be viable, had to confer some selective advantage, or at least not be disadvantageous enough to be eliminated by selection. It might have required very specific conditions. A particular size ratio between cells, a particular chemical environment, a particular set of genetic mutations. On Earth it happened, once, and that single event made all the difference. But let's assume it does happen elsewhere. Let's assume eukaryotic cells evolve on other worlds. What then? For another 1.5 billion years, Earth remained dominated by single-celled eukaryotes. Complex at the cellular level, with nuclei and mitochondria and other organelles, but still microscopic. Still simple in structure. They explored an enormous range of forms. Different metabolisms, different reproductive strategies, different cellular architectures, but they remained single cells. Then, around 600 million years ago, multicellular organisms emerged. Cells began cooperating, specializing, forming tissues and organs. Animals and plants diversified in an explosion of forms called the Cambrian explosion. Again, this took over 1 billion years. Again, the evidence suggests this transition is difficult. Multicellularity requires cooperation. Individual cells sacrificing reproductive potential for the good of the organism. Specialization. Differentiation. The evolution of signaling mechanisms that coordinate behavior across millions or billions of cells. It's not trivial, and it might not be inevitable. But let's keep going. Let's assume multicellular life evolves too. Now we need intelligence. On Earth, multicellular life has existed for 600 million years. In that time, complex nervous systems evolved independently multiple times. Vertebrates, arthropods, mollusks, at least 3 separate lineages invented brains. But intelligence of the human variety has emerged once, in one lineage, among one group of primates, on one continent, in the last few million years. There have been other smart animals: dolphins, elephants, octopuses, crows, parrots. These animals solve problems, use tools, display social complexity, demonstrate learning and memory. But none of them developed technology. None of them built cities or telescopes or radio transmitters. None of them engaged in cumulative cultural evolution on the scale necessary for science and engineering. Only humans. Why? It's not clear that intelligence is advantageous from an evolutionary perspective. The human brain consumes 20% of our body's energy, while representing only 2% of our body mass. It's metabolically expensive. It makes childbirth dangerous because the birth canal must accommodate a large head. It creates social and psychological problems that don't exist in simpler animals. Anxiety, depression, existential dread. For most of Earth's history, intelligence wasn't necessary for evolutionary success. Bacteria are still the most successful organisms on the planet by almost any measure. They've been here longer than any other form of life. They outnumber all other living things combined. They occupy more niches, from deep ocean vents to the upper atmosphere. They can survive conditions that would kill any complex organism. Extreme heat, extreme cold. Radiation. Vacuum. Intelligence is expensive, fragile, complicated. And for most ecological niches, it's unnecessary. A deer doesn't need to understand calculus to survive. A lion doesn't need to contemplate the nature of existence. A tree doesn't need to build telescopes. They survive just fine without intelligence. Better than fine. They thrive. So why did intelligence evolve in humans? Probably by accident. A combination of factors that happen to favor larger brains. Bipedalism freeing our hands for manipulation. Social complexity favoring communication skills. A variable environment favoring behavioral flexibility. An omnivorous diet providing enough calories to support a large brain. But none of this was inevitable. If early hominids had gone extinct, If climate had been slightly different, if any number of contingent factors had played out differently, intelligence might never have arisen. And technological intelligence is even rarer, because you need more than just a brain. You need limbs capable of manipulation. Hands or tentacles or something that can grasp and manipulate objects with precision. Dolphins are intelligent, but their flippers can't build tools. They're locked out of technology by their anatomy, an environment that permits technology. Fire requires oxygen. Metallurgy requires accessible ore deposits. Complex toolmaking requires materials that can be shaped. An aquatic civilization can't develop metallurgy. No fire underwater. No smelting. No Bronze Age. No Iron Age. No DOS. Industrial Revolution. A social structure that supports learning and cultural transmission. Technology doesn't emerge from individuals. It's cumulative. Built over generations. One person invents the wheel. Another adds the axle. Another figures out how to make stronger wheels. Another applies it to new purposes. Over centuries, the simple wheel becomes the automobile. This requires culture, language, teaching, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next, building on what came before. A sensory system that perceives the world in ways that make science possible. Vision helps enormously. Being able to see celestial objects, to observe patterns in the sky, to notice regularities that suggest underlying laws. Hearing helps. The ability to detect sound waves, to notice echoes and resonances, to understand that sound propagates through media. Imagine trying to develop physics without being able to see or hear. Imagine trying to understand astronomy if you lived underground. Imagine trying to develop chemistry if you couldn't manipulate objects. The sensory modalities matter. They shape what questions you can ask, what patterns you can observe, what theories you can test. Look at the dolphins. Intelligent, social, long-lived, complex communication. Problem-solving abilities. But they evolved in an environment where fire is impossible, where metallurgy can't develop, where complex tool use is limited by their anatomy. They'll never build a radio telescope, not because they're not smart enough, but because their environment and anatomy don't permit it. Look at the octopuses, remarkably intelligent for invertebrates, can solve puzzles, use tools, display individual personalities, learn through observation, manipulate objects with extraordinary dexterity using their 8 arms. But they're solitary. Most species spend their lives alone. They don't pass knowledge to their offspring. Most octopuses die shortly after reproducing. The young hatch and must learn everything from scratch. There's no cumulative culture, no building on previous generations. They'll never develop science, not because they lack intelligence, but because their life history doesn't support the cultural transmission necessary for technological civilization. Intelligence is necessary for technology, but it's not sufficient. You need intelligence plus the right anatomy, plus the right environment, plus the right social structure, plus a very long time, plus probably a lot of luck. On Earth, it took 4 billion years to produce one species that could contemplate the stars. 4 billion years. One species, out of billions of species that have ever existed. What if that's normal? What if the galaxy is full of worlds with life, full of worlds with complex ecosystems, and still, technological intelligence is so rare that it arises once in a trillion planets? This is the Great Filter Hypothesis. The idea that there are insurmountable steps somewhere in the chain, from dead matter to spacefaring civilization. Barriers so difficult that almost no lineage crosses them. And we don't know where the filter is. Is it behind us? Did we already pass the hardest step? Is the emergence of life the rare event? Is it the evolution of eukaryotic cells? The transition to multicellularity? The development of intelligence? If so, we might be alone not because intelligence is impossible, but because the groundwork for intelligence almost never gets laid. Life is rare, or complex. Complex cells are rare, or complex organisms are rare. In that case, the galaxy might be full of dead worlds and microbial worlds, but empty of minds. Or is the filter ahead of us? Is technological civilization itself unstable? Do all species that reach our level of advancement inevitably destroy themselves? Nuclear war, climate catastrophe, artificial intelligence gone wrong, engineered pandemics, nanotechnology running amok, any number of existential risks created by the same intelligence that builds civilizations. The same curiosity that drives science also creates weapons of mass destruction. The same engineering that builds cities also destabilizes climate. The same biotechnology that cures diseases can engineer plagues. Perhaps every civilization reaches a point where it must navigate a minefield of existential risks, a narrow passage between becoming technological and becoming stable. And perhaps almost none of them make it through. Perhaps the galaxy is littered with dead civilizations, ruins on airless worlds, artifacts orbiting burnt-out stars. Evidence of intelligence that briefly flickered and then went dark. Archaeological sites that will never be excavated. Libraries that will never be read. Art that will never be appreciated. All lost, all forgotten. We don't know. But the silence suggests something is very, very difficult. Some step in the chain from chemistry to consciousness to civilization is so improbable that even in a galaxy of 400 billion stars, it has happened only a handful of times, maybe only once. And yet, there's another explanation for the silence. One that's darker than rarity. One that suggests intelligence might be common, but contact is deliberately avoided. The dark forest hypothesis. Imagine the galaxy is full of civilizations, thousands of them, millions, all technologically advanced, all capable of interstellar communication or even travel. But they're all silent, because they're hiding. Why would they hide? Because the universe is a dark forest. Every civilization is a hunter, and every signal, every broadcast, every beacon into the void is a shout that reveals your position. You don't know who's listening. You don't know their intentions. You don't know if they're friendly or hostile or simply indifferent to your existence. You don't know if they're more advanced than you or less advanced. You don't know if they're desperate for resources, or curious about other life, or threatened by the existence of competitors. But you know that revealing yourself is a risk, a permanent one. Once you broadcast your location, you can't take it back. Any civilization in range now knows you exist, knows where you are, can target you if they choose. So you stay quiet. You listen, you watch, but you don't speak. And every other civilization does the same. The galaxy becomes a forest at night, full of life, full of intelligence. But every hunter is still, every breath held, every movement frozen, because the first to make a sound might be the first to die. This is the dark forest hypothesis, named after a science fiction novel by Chinese author Liu Cixin, but rooted in game theory and the logic of mutual assured destruction. It works like this. Assumption 1. Survival is the primary goal of every civilization. Not friendship, not exploration, not knowledge. Survival. This seems reasonable. Natural selection would favor civilizations that prioritize their own existence. Assumption 2. Resources are finite. Stars burn out. Planets can only support so much life. Energy is limited. Any civilization that expands will eventually compete for resources. Assumption 3. Civilizations cannot reliably determine the intentions of other civilizations. Communication is slow. Light-speed delays mean you can't have real-time conversations, and even if you could, how would you know they're telling the truth? How would you trust them? Assumption 4. Technological progress is unpredictable. A civilization that seems less advanced today might leapfrog you tomorrow. They might discover something you haven't. Develop a weapon you can't defend against. You can't assume your current advantage is permanent. Given these assumptions, what's the rational strategy? If you detect another civilization, you face a choice: contact them or destroy them. If you contact them, you reveal your location. You create a potential threat. They might be friendly, but they might not, and you can't know for sure. If you destroy them, you eliminate the threat. Preemptively, before they can become strong enough to threaten you. The logic is brutal, but clear. In a universe where intentions are unknowable and technological progress is unpredictable, the safest strategy is to destroy any civilization you discover before they can destroy you. And every civilization, reasoning the same way, reaches the same conclusion. The result is a galaxy where everyone hides, where broadcasting your location is suicide, where the first rule of survival is silence. This is speculation, of course, a thought experiment. But it resolves the Fermi Paradox neatly. Intelligence is common, but contact is non-existent because contact is dangerous. Is it true? We don't know. It requires assumptions about the nature of alien civilizations, about the prevalence of aggression, about the economics of interstellar conflict. Are resources really so scarce that civilizations must compete? In a galaxy with hundreds of billions of star systems, is competition really inevitable? Or might there be enough for everyone? Can civilizations really destroy each other across interstellar distances? Launching weapons across light years is expensive and slow. By the time your weapon arrives, the target civilization might have evolved, moved, or built defenses. Is interstellar warfare even practical? And is aggression really universal? Humans are aggressive, yes. We have wars. We compete. But we also cooperate. We build alliances. We trade. We share knowledge. Might alien civilizations be more cooperative than we are? Less paranoid? We don't know. But the dark forest hypothesis raises uncomfortable questions about active SETI, deliberate transmissions from Earth, loud announcements of our presence. Since the 1970s, humans have sent intentional messages toward nearby stars. The Arecibo message in 1974, the cosmic calls in 1999 and 2003, the teen-age message in 2001. Multiple transmissions over the decades, each one broadcasting Earth's location and signaling our existence to anyone who might be listening. If the dark forest hypothesis is correct, we might be making a terrible mistake. We might be shouting into a forest full of predators, announcing ourselves to civilizations that will view us as threats, targets, resources to be exploited or eliminated. Or perhaps not. Perhaps the forest is full of civilizations who have all reached the same conclusion we're reaching now. That cooperation is more valuable than conflict. That intelligence, being so rare, should be cherished rather than destroyed. That the risks of contact are outweighed by the benefits of shared knowledge, mutual aid, and the relief of cosmic loneliness. Perhaps the dark forest is a paranoid fantasy. Perhaps the galaxy is more like a quiet library where everyone whispers to avoid disturbing others, and contact is rare not because it's dangerous, but because it's difficult, and everyone is preoccupied with their own concerns. We don't know. We stand in the dark, listening to silence, and we imagine all the reasons why the galaxy might be quiet. Vast distances that make contact impractical. Narrow time windows that make synchronicity unlikely. Perceptual barriers that make recognition impossible. Filters so severe that intelligence almost never arises. Dark forests where everyone hides. Or perhaps something simpler. Perhaps intelligence is common, but curiosity is rare. Perhaps most civilizations simply don't care about the stars. They solve the problems of their own world and never look outward. They're content, happy, uninterested in exploring the cosmos. Perhaps we're unusual not in being diligent, but in being restless, in asking questions, in reaching beyond ourselves. Perhaps most civilizations are satisfied with what they have. They achieve stability, solve resource problems, eliminate suffering, and then stop. They don't expand, they don't explore, they don't broadcast, they just exist, quietly, contentedly, for millions of years. And from our perspective, they're invisible. We wouldn't detect them unless we visited their star system directly. And we can't visit even the nearest stars. So what does all of this mean? What does the Great Silence tell us? Let's return to where we started. The numbers that suggest life should be common. 400 billion stars. Billions of potentially habitable worlds. The mathematics of probability. And the silence that contradicts those numbers. We've explored 4 barriers: distance, time, comprehension, rarity. Each one formidable. Each one potentially sufficient to explain why, in a galaxy that might host thousands of technological civilizations, we have never made contact. But beneath all of these explanations is something more profound. The universe is old, 13.8 billion years. The Milky Way is nearly as old, 13.6 billion years. Earth formed 4.5 billion years ago. Life emerged relatively quickly, within the first few 100 million years. Intelligence took much longer, 4 billion years. If our timeline is typical, if it takes roughly 4 billion years for technological civilization to emerge once conditions are suitable, then there should be civilizations in our galaxy that are billions of years older than us. Billions. Think about what humanity has accomplished in the last 10,000 years, from agricultural villages to quantum computers, from stone tools to spacecraft, from counting with our fingers to simulating entire universes in supercomputers. 10,000 years. Now imagine what a civilization could accomplish with 1,000,000 years of continuous technological development, not interrupted by dark ages or collapses, not starting over from scratch every few centuries. Continuous progress, building on every previous generation. 1,000,000 years. They would be incomprehensible to us. Their technology would appear as magic, Their accomplishments would make ours look like children's toys. And 1 billion years, a civilization that had been developing technology for 1 billion years. We can't even imagine what they would be capable of. They could reshape stars, build structures the size of solar systems, harness the energy of entire galaxies, create new forms of matter, manipulate space-time itself. They would be gods by our standards. And yet we see no trace of them, no megastructures, no signs of stellar engineering, no Dyson spheres harvesting the total energy output of stars, no altered planetary orbits, no evidence of anyone, anywhere, reshaping the galaxy to their needs. This is strange, deeply strange, because the universe should be full of evidence. If technological civilizations are common, if even a fraction of them survive and expand, if even a tiny percentage continue developing for millions or billions of years, the galaxy should be transformed, visibly artificial, engineered on vast scales. But it's not. The stars shine as if no intelligence has ever touched them. The planets orbit as if no mind has ever calculated their paths. The galaxies rotate as if the universe is empty of consciousness. Everything looks natural, untouched, pristine. Either civilizations don't last long enough to transform the galaxy, or they choose not to, or we're early enough that no one has done it yet. Or we're alone. This might be the most important observation in all of science, because it tells us something about our own future. If the great filter is ahead of us, if civilizations inevitably destroy themselves, or stagnate, or fade away before they can leave a mark on the cosmos, then we are looking at our own destiny. We are staring into the same void that consumed every intelligence that came before us. The silence is a warning, a message from civilizations that no longer exist, written in the absence of their signals. They rose. They developed technology. They asked the same questions we're asking. They searched the skies for others like themselves. They heard the same silence. And then they died. Nuclear war, climate collapse, artificial intelligence, synthetic biology, resource depletion, social collapse, any number of pathways to extinction. The same intelligence that lets you build radio telescopes also lets you build weapons that can sterilize your planet. The same curiosity that drives exploration also drives experimentation with dangerous technologies. The same ambition that creates civilizations also creates conflicts that destroy them. Perhaps this is inevitable. Perhaps every technological civilization faces a period of existential risk, a few centuries where they teeter on the edge between extinction and stability, and most of them fall. If that's true, then we're in that period now. This century, maybe the next. The narrow window where our technology is powerful enough to destroy us, but we're not yet wise enough to avoid it. The silence tells us that very few civilizations make it through this window. But if the great filter is behind us, if we've already passed the hardest steps, if intelligence is genuinely rare and we are among the first or the only, then we bear a different kind of responsibility. We are the universe becoming aware of itself. The cosmos looking back at its own history. The first or the only time in 13.8 billion years that matter has organized itself in such a way as to contemplate its own existence. If that's true, then every human life, every thought, every artwork, every discovery, every moment of love or grief or wonder's cosmically precious, because it might be the only time it ever happens. The silence of the stars is not just a scientific puzzle, it's an existential mirror. It reflects back our deepest questions about purpose and meaning and value. If we are alone, then we are extraordinary. unique, the only consciousness in the observable universe. That makes us precious beyond measure. It also makes us terribly fragile. If we disappear, if we destroy ourselves or fade away, the universe returns to silence, to blindness, to a state where stars are born and die unwitnessed, where beauty exists but no one sees it, where the laws of physics operate but no one understands them. The universe becomes a mechanism without meaning, a process without purpose, complexity without consciousness. And if we are not alone, if the galaxy hosts other minds, then we are part of something larger. A community of consciousness scattered across the stars, each node perhaps invisible to the others, but all engaged in the same fundamental project. Understanding. Surviving. Creating meaning in a universe that offers none. Either way, the silence demands something from us. It demands that we take seriously the possibility that consciousness is rare, that intelligence is fragile, that the window in which technological civilization can exist is narrow and perilous. It demands that we confront the risks we've created, the weapons that could erase us in hours, the climate systems we've destabilized, the technologies we're developing without fully understanding their consequences. Because if the great silence tells us anything, it's that something is very, very hard. It's about surviving as a technological species, and we are in the middle of finding out what that is. There's a concept called the Copernican principle, the idea that Earth is not special, that we should not assume we occupy a privileged position in space or time, that what's true for us is probably true elsewhere. This principle has been extraordinarily productive in science. It led us to realize that Earth orbits the Sun, not the reverse, that the Sun is an ordinary star, that our galaxy is one among billions, that the laws of physics are the same everywhere. Every time we've assumed we were special, we've been wrong. Earth is not the center of the solar system. The solar system is not the center of the galaxy. The galaxy is not the center of the universe. There is no center, no privileged location. We are ordinary, typical, unremarkable. Except, the great silence seems to violate the Copernican principle. If intelligence is common, we should see evidence, we should hear signals, we should detect activity. The fact that we don't suggests we might be unusual after all, not special in a cosmic sense, not chosen or favored by any deity, but rare. Genuinely rare. And rarity creates responsibility. If you are the only one who can speak, you must speak carefully. If you are the only one who can see, you must look closely. If you are the only one who can understand, you must understand deeply. The silence tells us we might be the custodians of something precious, not just human civilization, but consciousness itself. The capacity to wonder, to question, to seek answers, to create beauty and meaning in a cosmos that otherwise offers none. This is not a comfortable thought. It would be easier to imagine a galaxy full of civilizations, to believe that even if we fail, others will continue. That intelligence is robust, widespread, certain to endure. But the evidence suggests otherwise. The evidence suggests we are candles in a very dark room, and we must take care not to extinguish ourselves, because no one is coming to relight us. No rescue, no intervention, no older, wiser civilization waiting in the wings to guide us through the difficult transition from planetary to interstellar species. We are on our own. If we destroy ourselves, the universe will not mourn. It will not notice. The stars will continue to burn. The galaxies will continue to rotate. The laws of physics will operate as they always have. The planets will orbit their stars. The asteroids will drift through space. The comets will trace their elliptical paths. All of it unconscious. All of it blind. All of it meaningless. But something will be lost. Something that might never arise again. The scheme. Ability of the universe to know itself. Think about that. For 13.8 billion years, matter and energy have evolved according to mathematical laws. Quarks combined into protons and neutrons. Protons and neutrons combined into atoms. Atoms combined into molecules. Molecules combined into stars and planets. Stars ignited, fusing hydrogen into helium, helium into carbon, carbon into oxygen, all the way up the periodic table to iron. Stars died, exploding as supernovae, seeding space with heavy elements. Those elements condensed into new stars, new planets. On at least one of those planets, chemistry grew complex enough to be called life. Life evolved, diversified, became complex, developed nervous systems, brains, consciousness, and now, in this brief moment, this tiny window of time on this small planet orbiting an ordinary star in an unremarkable region of a typical galaxy, the universe has become aware of its own existence. It can contemplate its own history. It can predict its own future. It can understand the rules that govern its behavior. Hydrogen atoms, formed in the Big Bang, have become conscious of themselves. That is what we are. That is what consciousness does. It's the universe observing itself, understanding itself, creating meaning within itself. And if we're the only place where that's happening, if the silence of the galaxy means what it seems to mean, then we are not just important to ourselves. We are important cosmically. We are the part of the universe that knows there is a universe. This doesn't mean we should panic. It doesn't mean we should abandon hope or sink into despair at the weight of cosmic responsibility. It means we should be thoughtful, careful, aware of what we're risking every time we create a new technology without fully understanding its implications. Every time we prioritize short-term gains over long-term survival. Every time we allow tribalism and conflict to override our common interest in endurance. The kako, great silence, is a warning. But it's also an opportunity. If we truly are alone, or even if we're simply rare, then we have the chance to be something extraordinary. To be the civilization that makes it through, that survives the filter, that endures long enough to spread beyond this planet, to establish ourselves across multiple worlds, to become resilient against extinction. We have the chance to be the answer to Fermi's question. Where is everybody? Here. We're here. We made it. We survive. But that requires choices. It requires wisdom. It requires looking at the silence of the stars not as a mystery that frustrates us, but as a lesson that guides us, because the silence is trying to tell us something. It's telling us that the journey from chemistry to consciousness to cosmic expansion is difficult, perhaps almost impossible. It's telling us that civilizations are fragile, that the same intelligence that builds wonders also creates dangers, that technology is a double-edged tool that can elevate or destroy. It's telling us that we should not take our existence for granted, that every day we endure is a small victory against enormous odds, that every generation that successfully passes the torch to the next is a triumph. The universe does not care if we survive. It offers no guarantees, no safety nets, no divine intervention, no older civilizations waiting to rescue us if we stumble. But we care, and that's enough. Because caring is what consciousness does. We look at the cosmos and we feel wonder. We look at the stars and we want to understand them. We look at the silence and we ask why. That impulse, that drive to question and explore and understand, is what makes us human. It's what makes us valuable. It's what makes us worth preserving. And perhaps, someday, if we're very lucky and very wise, it's what will carry us beyond this planet, beyond this solar system, out into the galaxy that seems so empty. Perhaps we'll be the ones to break the silence, not by shouting into the void and hoping for a response, but by enduring long enough to become the elder civilization ourselves, to become the intelligence that others, millions of years from now, might search for, to become the signal in someone else's telescope. That's the responsibility the silence places on us, not to solve the Fermi Paradox, but to make sure that when the next civilization looks up at their night sky and wonders, "Where is everybody?" they can point to our star and say, "There, they're there. They made it. They survived. They endured." So what does the Great Silence mean? It means we matter, more than we might have imagined, more than we're comfortable with. Perhaps. It means the universe is watching through our eyes, thinking through our minds, caring through our hearts. It means that every human achievement, every act of kindness, every moment of beauty we create or preserve or appreciate is not just important to us. It's cosmically rare, possibly unique, precious, beyond calculation. And it means we have work to do. We have a planet to protect, a climate to stabilize, weapons to control, technologies to guide, conflicts to resolve, a future to build. Not because someone is watching, not because we'll be rewarded, not because the universe demands it, but because we are the universe, the part that can choose, the part that can build, the part that can hope. And if we are the only such part, if the silence is as complete and as final as it seems, then we owe it to the cosmos itself to endure, to survive, to become the answer to our own question. Where is everybody? Right here, still listening, still searching, still hoping, still alive. There are more stars in the observable universe than grains of sand on every beach on Earth. We began with that image, the vastness of space, the probability that we should not be alone. And now we end with it. But the meaning has changed. Because we've spent these hours examining why, despite those trillion stars, despite billions of worlds, despite the mathematics that suggests intelligence should be common, we have never heard a whisper from the darkness. We've explored the barriers, distance, time, comprehension. Our summarity. We've considered the possibilities, that we're alone, that we're early, that we're hiding, that we're deaf to signals all around us. We've confronted the implications, the fragility of civilization. The responsibility of consciousness, the possibility that we are the universe's only witness to itself, and through it all, the silence remains, unbroken, unexplained, profound. But perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Perhaps the Great Silence is not a problem to be solved, but a condition to be accepted. A fundamental truth about the cosmos, a reminder that intelligence, consciousness, the ability to look up at the stars and wonder, is rare enough that it should be cherished, protected, nurtured. Each of us, made of atoms forged in the hearts of dying stars. We are stardust that learned to think. We are the universe examining itself. We are matter that has learned to wonder, energy that has learned to care. And in a cosmos where that might be extraordinary, where that might be unique, where 13.8 billion years of cosmic history have led to this brief moment of awareness on this small world, we have the privilege and the burden of continuation. The stars are silent, but we are not. And as long as we endure, as long as consciousness persists in this corner of the galaxy, the universe is not empty. It is alive, aware, wondering, reaching out into the darkness, hoping to find an echo of itself. And that might be enough.